OTB Culture Hall of Fame.
Brought to you by Now TV. Watch whatever you're in the mood for.
You're welcome along to the OTB Culture Hall of Fame, which is brought to you in association with Now TV. You can stream every episode of the unmissable news show Gangs of London on the Now TV Entertainment Pass, which also has a 14-day free trial that you can avail of. You'll also find our previous episodes right now on the OTB Podcast Network. So episode 2, for example, was Gladiator with Dermot Kennedy. After that, we'd Stephanie Preisner on talking about the US office. Kenny Cunningham doing Fawlty Towers was a classic. If you haven't seen that, check it out. Lenny Abrahamson on Detectorists and Erica Cody on Don't Touch My Hair are just some of the other ones. And delighted this week to welcome actor Peter Coonan to the show. Peter, how are you getting on?
I'm brilliant. How are you?
Very well, thanks. We might just start before we get into your Now TV Culture Hall of Fame induction into how life has been for you over the past few months, really. How life as an actor, I'd imagine, unless you're heavily involved in animation, I'd assume has been very, very tough over the last little while.
Yeah, there's been nothing happening whatsoever. To be honest, I've just kind of written off 2020 from early stage. I got a play done in January, which is something I can cling on to. But apart from that, yeah, I mean, I've been able to help my good lady out. She's in the restaurant business, so like she has opened a restaurant last September, Casper and Jim Beanie's in Dunleary, and I've just been delivering boxes for her, like barbecue boxes and different things like that. So it's given me the ability to help her out in this time. So that's been my main focus, you know. Was
there a lot that had to be put on hold once the pandemic hit?
Yeah, there were some projects that were meant to start in March, and I was meant to be over in June shooting for a few weeks. So an exciting project, but hopefully I'll be able to talk to you about it soon. But yeah, but I mean, you know, not all is lost. I mean, I'm not the only one in this position, so you just kind of have to. I've no overheads. I've no other people working for me. You know, there's a lot of positives to take from the fact that you know, I'm an actor, and it's a bit of a nuisance in a lot of ways, and I know the art is in serious trouble, but at least we've got some kind of a package now that we can look at. There's a slight bit of hope at the end of the tunnel. But, you know, people in a lot worse positions than me, so it's just like minding the kids, helping my good lady with her restaurant, and trying to focus on the positive, you know.
Is there any hope to be got from the fact that the likes of the streaming services like Now TV, I presume everybody's been a captive audience for the last 3 months. People are watching a lot. There's a lot of eyeballs on content, and that might actually help the economy within the industry to come back a bit quicker?
Yeah, well, I mean, I heard a producer I met recently telling me that it's going to be like the Battle of Helm's Deep. That once it's lifted, that you'll have you know, swarms of actors and producers with their various truncheons dying to knock down the doors of streaming services. But you'd hope that's the case, and you'd imagine it would be, because, you know, everyone had to rush their content. Like the Jordan doc was completed, they tell us, a week before the final episode aired. So, you know, everyone's pushed the content out so people can watch it during this tumultuous time. So yes, I think there's hope there. Yeah, and I think there will be a lot more stuff happening. I think everything's going to be, you know, pushed into trying to fit a lot of stuff into a year. With certain industries like, you know, weddings and my industry, hopefully it'll affect actors for the better. Well,
fingers crossed. Let's get straight to this, Peter, because you've got a phenomenal suggestion today. What are you putting into the OTB Culture Hall of Fame?
I'm very honoured and proud and excited to get goosebumps doing it, to put the Sopranos into the Hall of Fame.
I'm not going to ask why you put the Sopranos in. The question I'm going to ask you is, how many times have you watched the Sopranos, and why is it so rewatchable?
This is my third viewing.
Okay.
And the first viewing was like as a teenager on TG Car with my brother at home and our pals, all the way through then till it finished airing in 2007. The last episode aired, wasn't it, I think?
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, it completely affected me in different ways each time I watched it. I watched it then about 5 years ago when I had a hiatus from work, and I got back into it again. I watched that on my own, and then this time around I was kind of said to Kim, you know, are you ready for this? You know, because if someone joins you in watching something that means so much to you, you need their like undivided attention. You know,
Yes.
There's no phones. You turn into a slight fascist when it comes to that scenario. Because I remember trying to watch The Wire with her, and she was. First of all, the first 50 minutes, and that meant a similarly unbelievable amount to me as both an actor and a person. And after 10, 15 minutes, she just wasn't giving me what I needed. So I just had to cut the cord in that one and just put it in the back burner for another day. But with The Sopranos, I knew that like she'd get into it quickly because there's so much there for everyone. You know what I mean? So each time it just meant so much. But also, I mean, different things affected me in different ways. But this time around, my third viewing, I suppose, as a father and now as a married man or close to a married man, you know, it affects you differently. You start to see Tony in a different light, and the examination of a man and the humanity, the access to the humanity of a gangster that's so skillfully done. And then I think, you know, it's coupled with the world of gangsters, which we've kind of grown up in from the Godfathers, Goodfellas, all Scorsese's films, Departed, and everything else that we know, and LoveHate to a certain degree in this country for sure. So that all coupled together, it's exciting, and then it's so real and it's so raw. And it's so tragic, ultimately, you know, for so many of the characters.
Peter, I think my experience of watching this was probably similar to you. We're a bit older than known, so I remember staying up late to watch it on TG4 when it first came out in 99, 2000. But Tony Soprano, I guess him as a character is one of the reasons that The Sopranos was so excellent over the 8 years of its run. Because in many ways, we're looking at a guy who is the complete opposite of the movies that the mob guys watch within The Sopranos. He's not the glamorized kind of Scorsese front man at the top of the mob. We're looking at a guy from basically the first episode who is a broken man here.
Yeah, and that's the genius of the show, isn't it? Like that, we get an insight into the psyche and a man essentially having a breakdown. You know, who is the boss of a family, of a company, whatever way you want to put it. And then we see him struggling with being a father, struggling with being a husband, struggling with an overpowering mother. And I think that's the most interesting part of it, because he's kind of weak to the words of his mother, and they just can strip him down in an instant. And then you see him taking out that frustration on some of the members of his crew. And yeah, I mean, you just follow him through, and then, I mean, you're watching someone who is a complete master of the craft, and it's so subtle, and he's just on edge throughout the whole thing. And watching it back as an actor, I think sometimes you can try and watch someone like Gandolfini and you're totally in awe, and you're trying to look to go, oh my God, like what's he doing? And it's just impossible to kind of take his skill out from watching it, because it's just so natural. He's just become this character over time, and the little nuances and every little way that he says his dialogue is just, you can't see anyone else but Tony Soprano. And then also, you know, the whole cast is just impeccable. Every single person that comes into it plays the part to absolute perfection, I think.
That's very interesting, actually. Gandolfini's anniversary is Friday, by the way. So it's like, we were going to chat about this, and it's interesting that you mentioned the entire cast, but I think Gandolfini is the one to mention, because as you mentioned, the sort of immersion within the entire character of Tony Soprano, becoming that character. In a way, do you suspect that over time it was such an easy role for him to show up and do? Like, did he become the embodiment of Tony, or how did he view that in terms of the outside looking in on a technical point of view?
No, I don't. I think that, like, with a show like that, I think it each season got more challenging because the stakes got higher, and as we saw, you know, it was at some part of his life there was a crisis. You know, if it wasn't with Carmela, if it wasn't with Summer, if it wasn't with Anthony Jr., if it wasn't with one of the lads of the crew, if it wasn't with Chris, if it wasn't with one of his gumas, if it wasn't with the business falling apart, if it wasn't with the mother, if it wasn't with Uncle June, every time he got to a point of strength that he felt like he could leave Melfi and move away from that side of things, which was also bringing him down as a character within the mob, that the lads knew that he was seeing a therapist. Like, that was very difficult for him to deal with. But that was an amazing couple of episodes in the first two series where they found out and the slagging was happening. It was so kind of, you'd reminisce of when you were younger playing hurling or gar, or someone finding something out about someone and you just get ripped for it. But I think that it just got the writers, David Simon and David Chase, they just made it harder and harder, and his character became more nuanced, and you could see he was struggling with more as a character. So I think that, and I know from reading about Gandolfini that he had a massive relationship with his former acting coach. So they used to meet in New York before he'd have big scenes, or even not so big scenes. Anytime he had the chance to meet him, he'd meet him in a bar, and they just run lines.
Right.
So he was still at a point as an actor where he was, not that he was unsure, but that he really wanted to be bringing the best every time. And just before they started, actually, I just as lockdown began, I kind of made the decision to watch it. And I had been watching kind of, behind the scenes footage of them all talking about it, and how much it meant to them, and how little they knew when they started that it was going to be so big. But that the big kind of shock, and also what impressed them most about when they heard this series is happening, is that the casting, that when James Gandolfini was cast, that they thought, like normal gangsters films that we know, that it would have been someone of Clooney-esque film looks or presence or that kind of thing, whereas they went with someone who was kind of a bit more human and that we could all relate to. So then all the other actors, like Eddie Falco said that, like, at that point then I felt like, okay, I could have a chance at this part, because they might go for someone more glamorous that she thought. So it was all kind of became quite just about the person connecting with the character, as opposed to trying to pick a film star that will sell it.
Right.
So
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, well, all those elements just kind of really make it so, just so believable. And it came at a perfect time as well, as like so many TV shows do. But at the time then, I was texting Stuart Carolyn just saying that, reminiscing on our situation where it was like, it felt like it was something very blessed to be a part of, and that came at such a perfect time for a perfect show, for a perfect time, and for a perfect nation.
Yeah.
So I think with Sopranos there was so much of that involved, but I think there was non-stop working from all the actors. I think, and also with Gandolfini doing what he was doing, every single actor had to kind of up their game every time they were with him on screen, because his intensity was just so palpable.
Right, that's very interesting. Because basically the immersion in the character then, that's not really ever achieved. There isn't a place where Gandolfini is saying to himself, I'm comfortable being Tony Soprano. It was a constant work, even to the end, is what you're saying here, that he was meeting his acting coach quite late, by all accounts.
Yeah. I don't think I think that as an actor, when you get something like that, and he seemed to me to be a very humble guy, and that he was so appreciative and so grateful for getting the opportunity to do something like that, that he'd never rest in his laurels and think that I have this sorted. So it would constantly be pushing himself, and the script would push him, because you saw how each season, as I said before, just it was everyone's trying to knock him.
Can I ask you, in the context of the post-Sopranos world, how difficult or otherwise it is to achieve something like Tony Soprano, in terms of creating an anti-hero? Like, it seems that we've had quite a lot of them, in terms of like Walter White and Donald Draper, but then I wonder, are we actually just kind of dealing with the very cream of the crop here, and that there have been so many busts in terms of the anti-hero genre, that actually the post-Sopranos world is filled with a lot of people trying to imitate and failing to imitate well?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a very tricky character study to do when something has been done to such perfection and with such integrity. So, yeah, I mean, the Walter Whites of this world, it's a different character. You just got to throw someone into a different situation and then give them a characteristic that you wouldn't expect, I think, is something that everyone is trying to do, you know. But, yeah, the fact that there's only been 3 ones that we can speak of, I think now it's kind of episodic stuff and trying to create a world and then fitting various characters within that world. But, I mean, like shows like, I suppose... Peaky Blinders have created something with Tommy Shelby there, but I suppose that's not as much the obvious anti-hero, whereas he is just the kind of leading gangster of his time. But yeah, I mean it put TV on a pedestal, and it put characters like him on a pedestal. Like, it changed the landscape forever. So to try and emulate anything like that is going to take very, very high standards of writing and show running.
Peter, can I ask you about the impact of that? Because in many ways, you said The Sopranos kind of changed the landscape a lot, because previously cinema was king up until the late 90s. Sopranos was HBO's first massive hit. It's always what I associate when I see the distortion in HBO. It was Game of Thrones for a while, but I always think of Sopranos as being the classic series starting with that. It made the ground for some of the things that followed on, whether that be The Wire, Breaking Bad, possibly the other series that people talk about as being right up there with The Sopranos. But The Sopranos actually probably paved the way for a lot of these kind of long-term series, slower-paced storytelling. The Sopranos really opened the door here, didn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, at a time when it was all cable TV and like, what did HBO have? Boxing and the shows at that time. What shows would have been famous? Everybody Loves Raymond, certain things like that. There was nothing like this. You know, David Chase was say wanted to become like an avant-garde European TV film maker, and was working in TV for so long, but couldn't find a way into the market, so to speak. And was writing for various different shows in the States, and then suddenly wrote this pilot that was supposed to be, he wanted it to be a movie, and then obviously someone steered him in the right direction. HBO wanted then to get a show that would grab people and that would make people want to subscribe to HBO, and it came at a perfect time when nothing, we hadn't seen TV being done in the way that film was done, but it wasn't shot in that way. It wasn't, like as you say, slow, and the content wasn't dark, and the idea of an anti-hero and mixing it all, drama with comedy, and that very dark comedy that, Beckett style world that, there's nothing funnier than unhappiness, but it was just, it was just the perfect time, as I say, for a perfect show, and the Americans were gagging for something of this quality, and the way in which Tony's character was created just kind of, I think, blew people away. Like to mix this. To mix a gangster with, the troubles of modern masculinity as it was, and then told in such a long novelistic style way that we could see him unfold, and just very smart writing then, like using Shakespearean style literary metaphors and all that, like, and and then mix it with violence, and people are just sucked in by that, and the reality of it as well. I think actually Eeyore was probably a show before this that was kind of had close to groundbreaking, because it was the way it was shot and it felt real, and we got to see blood, and there was no real hyper drama like what was the one with Dick Van Dyke, Diagnosis Murder, something like that. But it was more gritty, But then Sopranos just took it to another level, and then obviously the viewership took hold. They had never seen anything like that before. So for people to sit down and watch these shows religiously week in, week out, completely paved the way for writers to think that they could then create a character over such a long period, and for us to be able to follow it, and then for actors, like, it's a dream then, because also, not to mention the fact that you're going to get you're going to be booked for a long number of years if you get a good role in something, but also you get time to kind of really dig into a character and kind of unfold it with other actors over a long period of time. And, I, for one, I'm an actor who has benefited, no doubt, from The Sopranos.
Is that too easy? Because I'm almost afraid of suggesting that Peter, like the comparison between Sopranos and LoveHate.
No, and I wouldn't dare compare them at all. Like, you know what I mean?
But even just from your perspective, like I would say that, like, I'm not sure is describing it as the Irish Sopranos. Is that unfair on LoveHate even? Is that just kind of, they're different kind of shows? There's a different sort of character study going on?
Yeah, they're different, completely different kind of shows. And, shows, shows are eventually always going to be compared to one another. But I think we need to take them all as a separate kind of piece of work in themselves, because they're both tackling a different story, different themes, and through different prisms, through different countries, through different situations, through different histories. But it's not unfounded to connect the two in regards to how TV was made, and that people like Stuart would have definitely been a huge fan of The Sopranos, obviously, and had then seen that as a way to create a show with a similar platform and a similar episodic serial way.
It's re-airing on RTE at the moment, LoveHate. I'm sure there are tons of people.
I believe.
So you believe. Like, it's incredible looking back on it. If you're talking about the HBO moments that Sopranos managed to fit nicely into, and how it was a perfect marriage of circumstance, you have to kind of say LoveHate was the same thing. There's this unbelievable piece of art, the best modern piece of Irish art possibly that we've seen, culminating at a time where people were willing to invest time every single Sunday night to this. Like, peaking at 1 million viewers in Ireland at the very end is an astonishing achievement. Like, I wonder, over the years, have you watched it back? Have you kind of delved back into the incredible thing that it was, or do you try and keep your distance?
Well, I delve back in regards to trying to get my show reel together and stuff like that, which is kind of a tricky thing to do, because it's quite difficult to watch yourself back over the years, because you look at yourself progress, which is good that you did progress. But I mean, there's times from standing back and appreciating what it was, I think there's times when you have to pinch yourself to go, how lucky and how little things fell into place that got you into that situation, to work with kind of those people at that time, and you just see where all the people have gone since then. And it just goes to show, it's a testament to the casting and to the writers, that they got these people with this energy at a time that was perfect symbiosis with a struggling country, and a TV show that happened to kind of hit that zeitgeist, and we were so committed to it, and it gave people so much joy at that time, And I suppose it's always going to be something that you're going to be very proud of, to be part of. But there is, I suppose, ultimately a time that you kind of step back and go, all right, you have to move on and kind of, plow your own field in a different way. But it's always something that, ultimately is drenched with pride. And you still get some positive remarks from people. And it's great that, like, I was talking to one of the PR people in RTE, and they were saying that nearly 500,000 people watched it, the opening episode, was it two Fridays ago? Even though a lot of them would have the box set, like, underneath their TV, they just still, like, tuned in to watch the live first episode. So it obviously still means a lot to people.
Yeah, well, I think nothing says LoveHate more than a couple of ad breaks in the middle of it. The box sets don't do it justice. You need to be on the television on RTE on a Sunday night.
Well, the tunes as well.
The tunes as well.
You get the tunes that Stuart picked on TV, and they were absolutely, like, that's something they should do. Get the box set of the tunes from LoveHate, because the tunes were brilliant. Like, it just made the show as well.
It's great to have it back. It's been great chatting to you as well, Peter. But the last thing we should mention is Liverpool are about to win the Premier League. You're a massive Liverpool fan. How much is your thirst about to be quenched right now?
Well, do you know what? Like, during this whole pandemic, and it's still ongoing, obviously, with everything that's going on, I didn't really find myself sitting there reading the football pages as much as I was, obviously, during the season. because I knew there was going to be so much nonsense out there about when it was going back, how it was going back, and what would happen. And I just kind of had to wait for it to be real, to the point that I knew it was going to happen. So at this point, to be honest, this is like the first time I've sat down and really thought about it. Like, I was actually donning the jersey this morning, but then I realised it was far too warm to be wearing the that stuff in the front room. But I mean, listen, yeah, it's going to be very exciting. It's unfortunate that it's happened, that we can't do it the way we would have liked to do it after all this time. But to be honest, I don't think that's going to take away from anything. I think that the way we played all season, we were by far the best team in the league, and I think we deserve this more than any team has ever deserved it.
Yeah, it's. I think, in fairness as well, I think the euphoria probably culminated around Christmas, when it became apparent at that point that they were going to win the title. I don't think it diminishes it one bit. Just a reminder that you're watching the OTB Culture Hall of Fame with Now TV, and we're talking about the Sopranos with Peter Coonan, which you can stream right now on Now TV, as well as all the live sport that you'll also be able to stream now that the Premier League is back. Are you excited in general about the return of sport then, not just about Liverpool?
Yeah, I am. Unbelievably, I'm sick of watching retro reruns of Premier League matches. But yeah, it's going to be exciting, big time. I just can't remember. It's so long since I sat down to watch football. I just can't remember what it's like to do it.
Maybe we don't have the attention span anymore. Yeah,
that's the thing. Yeah, so yeah, it's going to be giddy, but it's going to be strange as well, because you're not going to have any fans. It's going to be bizarre. You remember those games you used to watch when Inter and Juve didn't have any fans in the stands?
It was always Italy. It was always Italy.
It's always Italy. It's always been Italy.
Yeah.
You need to read Paddy Agnew's book to tell you that. But so that's going to be strange. I think it's going to be a different kind of football. And I'd say it's going to be completely different for the players as well. I mean, when you're so used, well, it's probably not actually. That's the question, because when they're so used to the fans, do they completely block them out? But from a Liverpool standpoint, when you're kind of down and the fans are there to lift you up, I mean, luckily we're not in a situation where it's a title race in that regard, because we certainly would need the 12th man. But I suppose it's an interesting one. It'd be interesting to hear the thoughts of the players after the first couple of games, and how the absence of fans affects them, and the adrenaline on the pitch. Yeah,
well, as a dedicated Liverpool fan, Peter, I congratulate you and your team on the success this season. Enjoy Liverpool finally getting over the line over the next couple of weeks. It's been great chatting to you, Peter. Thanks a million for hopping on the call.
Thanks a million, guys. All the best.
Great chatting to you. Peter Coonan there. And that is it for this week's episode of the OTB Culture Hall of Fame.
The OTB Culture Hall of Fame.
Brought to you by Now TV. Watch whatever you're in the mood for.